It's the off season, so we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, but I had the idea to look at the schedules, and this, again, is not a full-on breakdown and X's and O's and schedule predictions and all of those types of things. This is just a loose look because the schedule dropped while we were at the Super Bowl, or while y'all were at the Super Bowl, and I know I came on that day and talked a little bit about it, but there's 16 teams, so it's kind of hard to get all the way in on them in just a segment. So, yeah, just day by day, we're going to take a look at one by one alphabetical order and just kind of give our loose thoughts on what it is. Nothing too fancy, nothing too serious about this at all, just a glimpse at what's coming up. And in today's case, it is the defending Big 12 champions, or the reigning Big 12 champions. I think we left Arizona yesterday feeling like there are a lot of question marks, really, except at quarterback. But even at quarterback, there's a question mark because what level of Noah Fafita are we going to see? Are we going to see the guy who's really, really good at his best, or the guy who was not at his best a lot of times last year when they needed him to be? With Arizona State, I mean, you talk about two teams that came in on two completely different levels of thought in terms of the 2024 season, and certainly ended completely different than anybody could have imagined. You might have predicted Arizona being down compared to the really good year they had the year prior, but absolutely no one predicted Arizona State would run to the Big 12 championship. I mean, there's nobody that thought that, but that's what they did. Made a really stupendous showing in the college football playoff. Should have beaten Texas, could have beaten Texas, would have beaten Texas if not for one or two things here and there. So that's how they're rolling into this season. Now, they're going to lose Cam Scattaboo, and we'll get it more into, like, when we get into actual off-season predictions and previews and all that, the number of tackles they lost or linebackers and all of the details. But Jordan Tyson's going to be back. Sam Levitt's going to be back. They've hit the portal a little bit, and Kenny Dillingham's obviously one heck of a coach. So they start off their schedule next year with Northern Arizona. It's a typical non-con game. Get everybody fired up. I'm sure there will be some celebrating of the Big 12 title at home and all that kind of fun stuff. And then they get into their non-con, and I tell you what, this is the non-con they had last year. But you kind of started seeing the non-con of, like, dang, they might actually be kind of good. Like, they might actually be kind of good based on what we saw against Mississippi State and Texas State last year. They won both of those games after having beaten Wyoming and started off the year 3-0. Then, funny enough, they'd start Big 12 play and lose their first game to Texas Tech, of all teams. That was out in Lubbock. But they beat Texas State and San Marcos last year. They beat Mississippi State at home. Now they will obviously flip that. And so that's a pretty good little solid non-conference schedule. Northern Arizona, you'll take care of your business. Mississippi State, that'll be in Starkville, and at least early on in the season will be a raucous crowd and an improved Bulldogs team. And then, G.J. Kinney and company coming out to Tempe to battle it out in the desert. And I expect that they'll be pretty good as well. So, yeah, that's a nice little solid non-con to test you off the bat. And it definitely gave us a glimpse when they went when they went 3-0 to start the year last year. That gave us a little bit of insight, not that we knew it was going to result in, but that let us know early on of, like, okay, Arizona State's an improved ball club. And so I think we'll get a little bit of a taste of just kind of where they are in next year's non-con as well. So I like that. That's a solid non-con, Texas State and Mississippi State on the road.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, and that's going to be a huge game for Mississippi State, I think, as to where their season's going to go, how – they have a massive portal class at Mississippi State, like how all that comes together and works out for them. Can they stay healthy at the quarterback position? I guess Blake Shapen's back, right?
Yeah, Blake Shapen came back.
But they did get Luke Kromenhoek from Florida State, who was the starter down the stretch and a highly thought of quarterback. I mean, I don't know how to judge. I don't know how to tell you how to judge his season last year because,
Were things not great in Tallahassee last season?
I can tell you he didn't play as poorly as Brock Glenn and DJU did. So he was better than those two. But,
that's something.
What are we talking about here? They all had the same challenges in front of them. But, yeah, so I don't know. But that'll be interesting to see who their quarterback actually is. At that point in the season, probably I would think Blake Shapen.
I would think so, yeah.
But, you never know, how healthy is Blake. And,
that's always a question. much. I mean, the odds of Blake Shapen being healthy are probably as low as probably any active starting quarterback, just because of last few years. Frankly, he's been hard to keep intact on the health side of things and to keep healthy. So, it could be Chrome and Hoke by week 3. But regardless, that's a nice, respectable, solid schedule. It's the schedule from last year outside of Northern Arizona being flipped for Wyoming. But I do think that's a really good testing grounds for Arizona State before they go into Big 12 play. So then get into the rest of the schedule for Arizona State. No buys. They'll roll straight into their conference play, 4 straight games, and they've got Baylor in Waco. So first meeting between those two teams as Big 12 mates. And honestly, I don't know if that's one of the few, if only Big 12 meeting or only meetings between these two ever. I can check that real quick. They met once before, and that was in 1990. So this will be the first meeting since 1990, and only the second game ever between Arizona State and Baylor. Again, in Waco. They'll follow that up playing TCU, who they also did not play last season as a part of that schedule with having so many teams. So 2 teams that they hadn't played just yet, and then they will get their break. So 5 straight to start the season. Remember, 2 buys, and everybody's just kind of different. Do you go 3-4-5? Do you have 4-4-4? Like, what's your breakdown? Well, they'll have 5 straight games to start the season. So at Baylor, TCU, and then TCU, and then that break. So on paper, it could be interesting where they are sitting at 5 games.
They have TCU at home, so that's going to be a big help.
Yeah,
there. I think TCU will be improved. By the way, listing my quarterback tiers is going to take even longer than I thought because
we just saved that.
Yeah, but it ties in because I don't know where to put Josh Hoover.
I think he's pretty near the top, actually.
Yeah. I do too, but he throws a lot of picks. He
did a lot during the first part of the year. Yeah. He settled down a little bit, but talent-wise, technical abilities, he's near the top of the list.
So, look, if you're looking at, the quarterbacks that they're going to play, if I'm going through this list, I'll just tell you that back-to-back Baylor and TCU, that's tough quarterback. That's good. Sam Leavitt versus Sawyer Robertson and Sam Leavitt versus Josh Hoover. Those are pretty good quarterback matchups. And
they are.
Yeah, and so depending on how everything else goes around those guys, 14 of the 16 teams in the Big 12 know exactly who their quarterback's going to be. I would assume that Devin Dampier is the quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not
go ahead and put that in
there. I'm writing that, Nink. The only ones we don't know, UCF right now, I guess Ja'Cory Brown would be the guy if it was tomorrow.
I guess so.
And Oklahoma State, maybe Garrett Rangel, but they got the Henby guy from
no, they got Haas Haney is who they got.
Yeah,
from TCU. That's going to be their starting quarterback. Okay. I would be shocked if it's not. But, I think Haas Haney will be that guy. So maybe one spot's not quite filled in there.
So you think it's going to be Haney and not Rangel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Haas Haney there. So we got 15 of the 16, and maybe we have 16. Maybe it is Ja'Cory Brown. I don't know. Scott Frost. It's starting anew there. So but that being said, they don't play one single team that you don't know who it's going to be all year long. So.
Yeah, so they'll play TCU, and then that'll be their end of that 5-game stretch. But, they'll play Sawyer Robertson and Josh Hoover, so that'll be quite the little quarterback duel. And they've only played TCU a couple of times previously in their history, so those were back in the 70s, back-to-back, 74, 75. They played TCU, so a little taste of Texas. And I think for Kenny Dillingham, this is a schedule you love because in almost the first half exactly, you will play all 4 Texas schools in the Big 12. And for a team that's doing the whole Texas to Tempe thing, that's right up your alley if you're Kenny Dillingham, to go get more guys like Cullen Fight and bring them into the fold, or Jordan Tyson, also from Texas, and bring those guys into the fold. But
they also only have to come to Texas once.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, so Northern Arizona at Mississippi State, Texas State at home, at Baylor, TCU. That's their first 5. I think you're feeling good about 3 wins, and then I think it kind of gets fuzzy because I'm not going to do they are who they were last year. We don't know yet, so the Baylor game.
There's no scattaboo.
Yeah, there's no scattaboo, so the Baylor game could be interesting. The TCU game could be interesting, and then they'll get a break. That second wave, You come back on October the 11th. You're at Utah and Salt Lake City. Now, on paper, that could be formidable, although I know we've kind of knocked Utah down a peg in terms of our just where they are stature-wise after last year, but it's still Utah. Still going to, and I would think they're going to be better. I don't know how they possibly cannot be better than they were last year.
I have two things that I am remotely certain about in the Big 12. One is that I'm picking Oklahoma State last, and I've said that
Okay.
before. I'm going to keep saying that. I'm picking them last.
Your rivalry with Wet Blanket just continues to ratchet up.
And two, Utah with a young quarterback who is healthy that can do the things that Devin Dampier can do, and an offense he already knows, with some good players around him and a commitment to the run game, with a defense that's going to be good, Utah will be extremely better.
I think they'll be much better, and I just think the season will be more enjoyable for the fans and the coaches to have the peace of mind to just not be worried about the same thing every single week. Is our guy healthy? If you're in
class with Cam Rising and he gets a paper cutter, you're like, shit.
Oh, my God.
Here we go.
Yeah, I don't know. But, so they'll start with Utah on the road to start that second wave. Then it's Texas Tech at home. That was a hell of a game last year in Lubbock. That was a big win for Tech. And we didn't know just how big they'd be, one of the few teams out there to beat Arizona State. Then they get Houston also at home. So, again, those two Texas schools at home. And as you mentioned, or as I mentioned, you'll have played all four, Baylor, TCU, Tech, and Houston. 3 of those games at home, but you'll have played all of those games by the end of October. So that'll be great for the whole Texas to Tempe movement. And then you have Houston, as I mentioned, and then at Iowa State. That'll close out that second wave. So road trips to Salt Lake City and Ames, and Texas Tech and Houston sandwiched in between. I don't have like a prediction, but that could go a lot of different ways.
That's the toughest stretch to me, based on what I said about Utah. Well, we already know about Tech and like what their their stated goal pretty much is.
Yeah,
like,
we're doing on paper, man. Like they're at the top of the list of on paper. So that's one of the tougher matchups.
Then you go to at Iowa State, who brings back everybody pretty much but their 2 wide receivers. But
off of a team that was competing for the Big 12 championship last year. Yeah,
absolutely. So they bring back all of those guys, and they've replaced those wide receivers really well through the portal, and then they've got some young guys. And then you throw Houston in there, smack dab in the middle of the season, which is right about the time I wouldn't want to be playing a Willie Fritz team that's starting to find its groove, if that happens.
Yeah, and I think you're probably a bit more worried about playing Connor Wegman than you were Zion Chris at this point, or Donovan Smith for that matter. But, yeah, Houston, that's another one you don't quite know, but they definitely upped the ante at quarterback, and I think they'll be good in having another year under Willie Fritz. So, yeah, there's their second wave, and so like I said, there's 12 games, 2 breaks, so you might have 5 and then 4 and 3 like in Arizona State does, or it might be chopped up a little bit differently, but their schedule is a 5-4-3. 5 games break, 4 games break, and then that final stretch, who knows where they are, but they will have played in Starkville, in Waco, in Salt Lake City, and in Ames by the time they kick off their third leg of the journey, and that will be at home against West Virginia, which is now way more interesting because Rich Rodriguez is the coach there, and then at Colorado, which I don't know quite what to expect from Colorado, with Hunter and Sanders moving on, and then Arizona, the big rivalry game there at the end of the season. So West Virginia at Colorado, Arizona at home to close things out. I think for fans, you're probably already familiar with going to Salt Lake City or to Boulder. I think Mississippi State will probably be a fun road trip. I think Ames would be a fun road trip, and we'll always welcome you here as well. But, there's the schedule for Arizona State coming off that Big 12 championship, a tough non-con, all the Texas teams, a couple of formidable road trips, if not more than a couple, and definitely a team that seems like they're prepared to go and do this all over again. But last year was a magical run, and without Scattaboo, you still feel good about what you have. But, man, he was such a big piece to not feel like that's going to knock you a couple times, not having him, no matter what you did to replace him, is just kind of hard to imagine. But Kenny Dillingham's a hell of a coach, man, so I'm excited to see how they try to run it back, and I just hope that they can maintain the level of excitement, because Arizona State was not one of those teams that when we started talking about all these teams that were moving in, whether it was the wave of BYU and Houston and Cincinnati and UCF, and then a year later it was all the Pac schools, Arizona State was like the last school we probably ever talked about each time. And the reason why we talked about Arizona a bit more is because Arizona was coming off of
a really
much
good year.
better success. Yeah, the year prior, and they had some star players. But Arizona State, they have a target on their back now, so they're not going to be sneaking up on anybody.
No.
I think they'll be ready for a fight. But that's a nice little schedule there for Arizona State. Yeah, there's a little bit of a look in at what they've got coming up. So I think you feel great about winning a bowl. If I'm going to do like paper tests right now, that's 1, 2. Y'all have them losing a non-con game?
No.
You don't think so? Okay, me neither. So 3-0 to start the season. I mean, I don't think you're feeling like you can't beat Baylor or TCU or really any of these teams. I think bowl team easily should be the case and should be the bare minimum expectation. How many games they win, I don't really have in mind right now.
I would set their floor at 8-4 to me because
Okay.
I think they're going to be. I mean, I think they have one of the best coaches in the country right now. And
Yeah, I do too.
Gillingham. I think they've got and he's the best quarterback coach. And they've
Great
got
culture.
a great culture, all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, like, could Baylor and Tech and Iowa State hop up and beat them? Yeah, could they? I don't think this team loses a dumb one though. Like, that's what I think. I think if they're going to lose, it's going to be the better teams on the schedule that beat them. So they're not going to lose. They're not going to lose to Texas State, or they're not going to, let's just say for all argument's sake, it's Houston. Although I think Houston's going to be take a step this year. So yeah, I don't think they're going to lose a dumb one. But this schedule, again, on paper, I don't know how you could make it tougher in the Big 12 when when you put out like. There's no UCF and no Oklahoma State on this.
Yeah.
And those teams will be the ones I'll pick towards the bottom this year because I really don't know what Scott Frost is going to do.
That's a total mystery what that's
going to be.
It's a
So,
mystery.
in Oklahoma State, so, they don't have either of those teams. They don't have to go and play BYU and get in a rock fight with that defense. But as far as teams that you feel pretty good about being bowl teams, I think Baylor will go to a bowl. I think TCU will go to a bowl. I think Utah will go to a bowl. Texas Tech damn well better go to a really good one.
They don't, man. That's
the people who are paying money, they better go. They better go to a real. They better have
one of the all-time worst injury seasons ever, if that's the case. Yeah.
Iowa State's going to a bowl, and then the rest, I don't know.
Dude, I think West Virginia's going to be super feisty with Rich Rod. I don't know how good they're going to be. I think they're going to be super feisty though, and I think just. Those changes at a place like that makes that game more interesting now. So, yeah, I think you maybe set the floor at 8-4.
Yeah.
And that's, just being generous and taking into account that just stuff happens. Garrett, do you have any thoughts in particular on Arizona State?
I think as far as looking at the schedule itself, I love having a non-con matchup with Mississippi State where you can match up conference for conference because we know regardless of how you view it, it actually does matter in the eyes at the end of the season.
Yeah.
That's definitely going to matter there. Man, I like the rematch that you're going to get with Iowa State. Utah, I don't know about that one, man. I think that's one where Utah can actually beat them. But the familiarity that they have with that program, they've never been intimidated. Whereas some teams who weren't familiar with Utah in the Big 12, that kind of shocked them having to play that. That's not a factor with Arizona State going back to their ties with the Pac. But other than that, no, I agree. I think they're about an 8-4 team. I would be nervous looking at probably the like you mentioned, that West Virginia game, just because we don't know what to expect from them, and you definitely know that they're going to be a lot better.
They're going to have swagger back, if anything.
Man, yeah. So, no, I think it's a good 8-4 is probably about a good starting point. I also do think it is unique how you mentioned they are playing all the Texas teams, whereas we have programs in Texas. Hell, Baylor and Texas Tech are one of them that you don't get that. So that is a point of emphasis for them, and I think that will benefit them in the recruiting in the long run. But, no, it should be a hell of a season for Arizona State.
Yeah, I think it's a fun schedule. I think it's a tough schedule. And I think, outside of maybe missing BYU just on paper, they're pretty much playing all the other teams that you think will be pretty good, playing all the Texas teams. So really good non-con and some fun games both at home and away. So, yeah, there's Arizona State's schedule. We'll actually make real predictions and whatnot in 5 months from now when we actually know everything about these teams. But this is an exercise to just have fun riffing on the schedule since those just dropped last week. And so there's Arizona State. If you're an Arizona State fan, you're we're going 10-2. That's totally fine. I think 8-4 is a nice starting spot, though, to at least just say, what's the what's the threshold for success or failure? I think if you're 8-4 following last year, you feel like you're in a good spot. If you're less than that, then maybe you're slipping a bit more than you expected to. But that's a good schedule right there, and I think that's going to be a lot of entertainment for Sun Devils fans out there. So there you go.